dear friends. And because that at least 1/3 of the participants from the rural reconstruction movements from mainland. And another 1/3 is our resource persons and facilitators. So I think that they are more familiar with what I'm going to talk. So let me just speak English to make another 1/3 from overseas to know that what is the local situation in mainland. And there's a common knowledge that no matter what kind of political problems taking place, you must can find the explanation from the economic affairs. So even when we talk about the Korean Peninsula, the conflicts between North and the South, and also when we talk about these countries involved, like mainland China, like Japan and the United States and whatever, we all know that there must be some kind of economic affairs at the background. And when we talk about the G7, you know that when American President Trump fly to Singapore, he reject to sign the G7 commitment. And when we talk about the G7 problem, we also can find the economic affairs as a background. And when we talk about the Shanghai Cooperative Meeting, nowadays happening in Qingdao, and so and so, we all can find the problems that's from the economic affairs. So when we talk about the strategy transformation in China, we also need to know that this transformation is somehow related with the trade war between the United States and China. But nowadays, the trade war is not only happening in between US and China, also in between Canada and US, European US, Japan US. Nowadays, US is a leading country, but leading country now make many conflicts with other followers. So when we talk about these contradictions, we also need to know that the background of, from the economically, we can know that what happened as the background. So the first, I think this picture to show that 200 years change. The beginning of the 19th century, at that time, Western Europe has occupied the 4 continentals. The first is South America, and North America, and Australia, and Africa. When Europe conquered these continentals, they became the most economic powerful area. So in Europe, from the beginning of the 19th century, the GDP percentage in the world is the highest. But even that, the Asia, like especially the China, India, at the beginning of the 19th century, still be somehow higher than the United States. When we talk about that, we must know that nowadays, Asia is the only one indigenous population continent. I think that is a concept we need to understand. What is North Korea? What is North America and South America and Australia? These are 3 continents. It's fully colonized by Europe. And the indigenous population in North America decreased to less than 2%. Large number of the indigenous population during these several hundred years colonization has been massacred. So less than 2% in North America and in Australia. But if you go to Asia, the whole Asia, it's now still be 100% or maybe 90% indigenous population. Like India, I think that's 100% indigenous population. And if you go to Japan, that is a single nation indigenous population in this country. Korea also. One nation, one country. So that is a different Asia and other continent. The other one is Europe. Europe is also the indigenous population continent. But Europe sent a lot of people to other continents. So that is the beginning of the 19th century. If we do the historical analysis, we must know that that is a basic situation. And caused by what? By the trade conflicts. Also, we can see that it's a trade war. Originally, thousand years, Asia as a kind of advanced area exports the commercial goods to West. But the business not directly deal by the Asians, by Arabic area. So the Arabic area is the media. They do the business from Asia to Europe. So the Arabic take south part of the Europe, like Spanish and the Balkan, this area taken by Arabic. It's because of they do the business to the Europe. And then Arabic also expand to the South Asia, like Malaysia, Indonesia, this area. And because they control the business between Asia and Europe. So that is a history. And then caused by the Asia exports a lot of commercial goods to the West. And Asia gain large amount of the surplus. So before 19th century, long-termly, Asia, especially China, at that time, China is a long-term unified country, as a mainland country, so they can produce a lot of commercial goods exports to other world, especially to West. And before 19th century, India is separated as hundreds small kingdoms, so not so productive. But China at that time produced a lot, especially the silk and tea and the China's exports to the overseas. So China gained large number of the trade surplus. And then these trade surplus turned to the, not gold, turned to the silvers. And then China became the biggest silver reserve country. From the biggest trade surplus country, turned to the big silver reserve country. That is before 19th century, caused by trade surplus. West country come to China to start the Opium War, and then caused by the opium export to China. You know, opium is a poison. By Opium War, and then to enforce China to make opium trade legal affairs. I mean, you are an opium trader. You are legal to sell your poisons in China. And for such kind of purpose, British conquered India to unify the whole India, produce large number of opium, and then also conquered Afghanistan, Burma, and these areas all produce opium to sell to China. And then to make the superstructure of China opiumized. So almost all the official generals, the businessmen and officials and intellectuals, they consume opium. And then down to the low class. So the whole China opiumized. And then the trade surplus became trade deficit. And then China became weakened and weakened. That is a truth of the history. And then so from the beginning of the 19th century and then to 20th century until the revolution taking place. So after the revolution, China gained independence, started deindustrialization. So it's not caused by such kind of nation, such kind of people. They would like to set up Western styles industries. It's because of the war, especially because of the Second World War. All people notice that, all people should know that the Second World War is not started from Europe. It started from Japanese attack China. That is the year 1931, much earlier than the European War. But because the history now, the textbooks of the history written by West. So they never talk about the Second World War started from the year 1931. They talk about the Second World War started in Europe. That is because of the Western-centric knowledge system. So when we now need to refresh our knowledge, we must know that that is caused by Japanese conquered China from the year 1931. And then when you have no industry, even that you can export some agricultural products, but no industry means that you must be the loser when you're facing not the challenge, when you're facing the war. And the others use their air force, their warship, their big gun to attack you. You have no industrial production. You have no so-called modern weapon. That is enforced China to aware that we must set up the own industries. So since 1930s, up to now, it's a long-termly China want to set up the industrialization. I fully agree as well with my Indian old friends, MP. We need to think about how to make the local, make the rural have a self-sufficiency economy. Yes, we have done it. But if you facing the challenge very seriously, that is they use their industrial products to fight you. And you also need to build up the industrialization. But in the indigenous population country like China, India, we both are the biggest indigenous population country in Asia. We don't have the chance to take others' properties. We cannot colonize others. So we only can do something inside. So what they should do in China, in the 1950s when China regained the independence, the leadership, including from Mao and his colleagues, all believe that we need to build up the industrialization. We need to set up the industrialization. So the only way is that we take the surplus from agriculture, from countryside. That is very clear at the beginning of 1950. So they set up the so-called collective system, people's communes, is exactly for more easy to take the surplus from the countryside, from the agriculture, not take the surplus from colonized continent. That is different. It means that China did have a very special historical period, can be named as self-exploitation, mainly contributed from the countryside. Because that time, 85% of population live in rural, live in countryside. The majority is peasants. So the majority contribute their surplus for primitive accumulation in the urban area, for industrialization. That is almost 30 to 40 years. Until 1980s, China took such kind of measures to deal with the economic crisis in name of economic reform. Most of these researchers, they do their research on the documents and the statistics books. But few people understand when you want to set up your industrialization, when you took too much surplus from the countryside, the rural area became more and more poor. They cannot buy the commercial goods. Even you set up industries, you have a mass production, but no domestic market, no local demand. So that is the crisis. Such kind of crisis indicated by Marx 100 years ago. So it's happening in China again. So we have the crisis is Marxist crisis. It's because of you take too much surplus from the countryside, means that you reduce your local market demand. But in the 1980s, when China started so-called reform, but indeed, China started the rural industrialization. Large number of the surplus labor from countryside, when they dismissed the People's Commune, means that liberalize this surplus labor. These laborers initiated many thousands small and mid-sized enterprises in countryside, use their own labor. Means that this time, from 1980s, rural people exploited themselves. They don't have the so-called salary, formal income, no. They just work to take a little bit surplus for themselves, for family. Originally it's for family survival, and then it's larger and larger. The late 1980s, in rural China, we have 27 million small and mid-sized enterprises. 27 million. It's big enough. And then created more big domestic demand. And then driving the economy. Originally we have a less local demand, but caused by the rural industrialization, by rural townization, means the large number of small and mid-sized enterprises move to the towns. And town is the center for the rural industry. So caused by rural industrialization, we have a rural townization. It's not exactly urbanization. But MP talking about rural and urban. Now in rural society, we have a village and towns. Town that became the center of the industries, rural industries. So caused by the rural industrialization, rural townization, China gained high growth. That is the true story. Okay, and nowadays, what is the new challenge in China? New challenge is China did set up the mass production, but nowadays, China facing the challenge of overproduction. Overproduction happened in Western countries in 1920s, 1930s, and then followed by depression. It's a big depression, and then followed by Second World War. But nowadays, if you do your research in China, you can find that, okay, the same 1930s in Western countries, they have the overproduction as the main problem. Nowadays in China, the overproduction also the main problem. Now you can see that what China did to deal with such kind of challenge. That is, I think that's the economic background. We got to think about the different paths. Western capitalism is that first set up their primitive accumulation by colonization, take others' resources, others' labors as a surplus for the capital primitive accumulation. China got to follow the industrialization, but it did the primitive accumulation by self-exploitation, make the people become poor. But finally, they set up the industries. And then Western countries, after they set up the industries, they facing the challenge of overproduction and then turn to the World War. But in China, also they have the similar overproduction. Going to the war or not? That is the question. Okay, let's see what happened. China now trying to change their direction from industrialization into ecological civilization. Why? Because they don't want to go along the old way. That is a so-called Western style. Do you think that China can have their own style? Maybe or may not be. Similar problem. Caused by what? The first, caused by 1997 East Asian financial turmoils. At that time in 1990s, China turned their economy for overseas demand. So it's overseas demand driving economic growth in 1990s. When they have such kind of period, suddenly there is a overseas crisis happen. That is the East Asian financial turmoils. Originally, they know that these East Asian countries, they industrialized earlier than mainland China. Like Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and South Korea, and so on and so. We said it's 4 small dragons and 4 small tigers. That is a story in 1970s, 1980s, until 1990s. And nowadays, let me ask the question, where are they? Tigers? Dragons? Where are they? Almost all of these tigers and dragons failed, caused by large number of the capital flow out. Originally, it's a flow in, and then helped these countries to set up their industries. When they flow out, these countries fall into the financial turmoils. Why they flow out? It's because of 1991 Soviet Union collapse and the Cold War ended. Originally, United States and Soviet Union both invested into the Star War. That is a big project. Large number of the investments invested into R&D, research and development for so-called military high-tech. But when Soviet Union dismissed, collapsed, Cold War ended. And then these high-tech investments became the sunk cost. Nobody paid back. But the outcome of high-tech investments can turn to the commercial use. And then 3 years later, 1994, high-tech as a new economy grew up from the United States and then absorbed a large number of the foreign capital flow back. And when this capital flow back from these so-called East Asian industrialized country, immediately to make these countries fall into the crisis. That is the truthful story. Not caused by these East Asian countries cannot manage their capital market. According to the textbook, according to the Western research, you believe that it's because of management of the capital markets is bad. Because of these East Asian officials, corrupt. It's a corruption. Yes, these are the reasons. But the main reason is that the capital flow out. And then at that time, it's the first time China facing the challenge of overproduction because overseas demand decreased much faster than before. So from that time, it's the first overproduction crisis happened in China. That is the year 1998. And let me tell you at that time, almost all of these state banks in China, the bank belong to the state, have 1/3 bad loan, more severe than almost all of these tigers and dragons, much severe than South Korea, than Thailand, than Indonesia, than Malaysia. Chinese bank must be bankrupted in 1998. So the situation, economic situation in late 1990s in China, not better, it's worse than others in Asian area. How China did that to deal with such kind of trouble? It's because the bank belonged to state at that time, not belong to private. It's a different system. So the bank belonged to state. And then state used the treasury bonds and the foreign reserve to refund this bank. And then to take all the bad loan out of the bank, controlled by a state company, and then sell this bad loan to the private, step by step, not one time. Many years, 20 years later, from 1998 to now, it's 2018. It's 20 years past. These companies still in selling these bad loans. Not finished, but not happened in 1 year or one time. So it means that China, by central governments, use the financial ministry to deal with the trouble, to make all the bad loans out of the bank, and then to refund the bank to make them to be the commercial bank in the markets. That is 1998. And then meanwhile, China do the policy of going long, means that governments directly use the government's power to issue the government's bonds, and then to use the government's bonds as investments for inland investments, for improve the infrastructure construction. From 1998, 1999, there is a West China development as a national strategy. And then Northeast China refresh, that is also the national strategy. The total amount is $1 trillion as infrastructure construction investments, leading by the government's bonds. So means that governments directly use the hands to invest for rescue the economic. That is similar as Roosevelt New Deal. Roosevelt New Deal is a capitalist measures. It's a capitalism. But at that time, late 1990s, Chinese government's very clear to know that we only can use the Roosevelt New Deal as a kind of example. To use such kind of measure in China, we may solve the problem. So they tried. They used such kind of measure, and then they solved the problem. And then followed by what? By new countryside construction. From the year 2005. So from the year 1998, they started to deal with the problem of the bank. In 1999, they used the treasury bonds, lead the investments for infrastructure construction in inland China. And then 2005, they started to invest into the countryside for infrastructure construction. Nowadays, $2 trillion. Trillion, not billion. $2 trillion now from the central invest into the local for rural infrastructure construction and also for the social construction. Nowadays, 99% of the village in countryside, in rural China, has built up 5 communication, means pavement road, electricity, pipe water, telephone, and Wi-Fi, internet. If you build fiber communication into the countryside, means that almost every village can be the base for creative. If you want to set up your small business, your workshop in village, okay, because you have a communication. So that is why we have a fast transportation now set up the stations in the village. Because you can directly use your mobile phone to send the order, and then every village can give you their products by such kind of fast transportation. So that is at least from the 2005, that is the year China started the new countryside construction. Large amount of the infrastructure investments into the countryside for improve the rural situation. And nowadays, 2 trillion investments has been invested into the countryside. So now, these years, caused by China want to transform into the ecological civilization, they started the rural revitalization as the national strategy. That means originally they built up this fiber communication into the administrative village. We have 500,000 administrative village, but nowadays they are trying to build up these 5 communication into natural village. We have 3 million natural village, not big village, a small one. Maybe 20 households, maybe 50 households allocated together as a natural village in some valley or some mountain hillside. No matter whatever, no matter wherever this natural village allocated, you need to build up this fiber communication into the natural village to make almost all the households can enjoy electricity service, enjoy the pavement road, and pipe water, and Wi-Fi, and whatever. So nowadays, 99% of the households in countryside has been served by electricity. Less than 1% have no electricity. Maybe it's in deep mountain area. And if you transport electricity to the village, to the rural households, you need to waste 80% of the power. I don't know if you understand or not. Means that if you transport electricity to the city, like in Hong Kong, yeah, it's more cheap. But if you want to send the electricity to the countryside, to every village, you need to waste 80% power by the network. But you must give the same price, means that governments subsidize 80%. But you have to do it, because rural people, they are low income. They cannot pay 80% much more than the citizens. So if you build up the pavement road into the village, you cannot ask the villagers to pay back. That is also the problems. When you build up the pipe water into the village, you also cannot take back the construction fees. So all of these things turn to the local government stats and the central government stats. But these stats is a constructive debts. Means that at least you use this money to build up a lot of facilities. These are physical properties. Even these physical properties cannot give you return, but it benefits local people, benefits rural households. To do it or not do it. Not depends on the textbook, The textbook tells all the officials, all the governments that you must apply the market system. But if you set up the market system, you must got a market return. But these investments, no returns. Think about that. Who take the responsibility? Government. So the governments nowadays to have a very heavy burden. That is the debts. So the government's got to issue more paper currency and also issue more government bonds. It's for construction, for infrastructure construction. So I think that nowadays a lot of people talk about the Chinese situation. They said, okay, you have a very much heavy debts. Percentage, if you put the whole of the comprehensive debts to GDP, the percentage may be less than United States. United States is 300%. China, 280. Just 20 less than US. But if you think the GDP, American is the biggest. And the debts also the biggest. So if you think about the number, American is the biggest debts. China is still smaller. Because GDP is also smaller, okay? Debts also smaller. But percentage, China just less than US. But US debts is destructive debts. Chinese debts is at least for the construction. So we said it can be calculated by how much physical properties you created, how much small and mid-sized enterprise set up in the countryside. So that is when China facing the trade war. This time, China wouldn't like to fight and wouldn't like to have another open war. The trade surplus is that. But we need to turn this overseas demand-driven economy into domestic demand-driven economy. How to change? That is the first question. By rural revitalization. If rural area can have millions mid and small-sized enterprises, certainly they can create large number of local demand. So I'll give you an example before I finish. The year 2008, I think that other people know that. That is Wall Street financial turmoil taking place. And then what followed? 2009, global crisis. 2010, European crisis. 2012, so-called Golden Five, BRICS, yes? And the BRICS all falling into the crisis. So one after another, 2008, Wall Street financial turmoil, turned to 2009 global crisis, turned to 2010 European crisis, and then 2012, it's a BRICS all falling into the crisis. And then when 2009 global crisis happened, foreign demand decreased again. China facing the challenge of second overproduction. I said the first overproduction caused by East Asian financial turmoil. Second overproduction caused by global crisis. GDP decreased. It's 60,000 enterprises closed down, bankrupted. 25 million workers laid off. 25 million is not a small number. You know that American President Trump, when he talked about the American policy, he said, okay, we must solve the unemployment in the United States. How much in the United States? Less than 3 million. But in China, in the year 2010, how much? 25 million. If we go back to talk about 1998, we have a 45 million SOE workers laid off, out of their job. In 2010, we have a 25 million migrant workers lay off. 60,000 factories, enterprises closed down, bankrupted. That's big events in any country. So how China solve the problem? If you are trying to follow the market system, then these closed down factories loan turn to the bad loan. And then workers keep going out. And then turn to the street fightings. But anybody here have any story about the street fighting in China in 2010? Think about many media in China. What happened? Nothing. It's because at that time, Chinese central governments started the new countryside construction, large number of the investments into the countryside, and then absorb a lot of laborers to have a cash job in countryside, not in urban area. That is a very big event. Means that even you have a overseas crisis turn to your domestic crisis, you still can have the measures to deal with the crisis. You can absorb this unemployment labor by your infrastructure construction. And then Chinese governments also gave a measure to deal with this large number of the commercial products stored at coastal area cannot sell to overseas markets. These automobiles, these refrigerators, washing machines, and color TVs all stored because no overseas demand. So at that time, Chinese governments gave a policy. Originally, Chinese gave the special priority to this exportation, 13% reduction of the tax. Now 13%, okay, give that 13% to rural people. If you are rural households, you buy the automobiles, you buy color TV, whatever, immediately you have a 13% discount within 1 year. The end of 2010, finish. So almost all of these rural households, when they have the infrastructure construction into the village, they buy automobile, they have a pavement road. They buy color TV, they have a Wi-Fi. They buy the refrigerator, they have electricity. They buy washing machine, it's a pipe water built up in the village. So just 1 year, 100 households have 104 color TV. Automobiles all bought by the rural people. So the rural enlarge the domestic demand, solve the problem of the global crisis. So that is China keep their growth caused by the rural reconstruction, caused by the government's bonds lead the investments into the infrastructure construction. That is the way to solve the problems, not the way going to the war to fight. But few people know that. That is the problem, because our scholars, even inside, we only follow this Western-style textbook. Few people do the investigation. Few people do field work. So nowadays, even we have a big change in countryside, but few scholars talk about such kind of big change. Originally, rural people want to change their position to be the citizen. But nowadays, if you go to China, go to rural, you ask these rural people, do you want to give up your household registration to be the citizen? They will give you answer, no. Because they became, you can see they are still be the low class, but they became the small properties holder. They free have a piece of land, no pay. Free have the land for their household construction. Means that almost all the rural households, all the rural people have land and also have a building. Even it's not resort, not so luxury, but anyway, there's no people have no building. They all have their buildings. They all have their land. When you build up the infrastructure construction into the village, even into the mountain area, means you make their properties more valuable. Their physical properties value increased. So nobody want to give their position. They don't want to be the citizen because they think, okay, if I go to the city, I need to pay everything. When I allocated my family in the village, I don't need to pay the water. I don't need to pay the so-called real estate management fees and whatever. So they can enjoy the free fresh water. They have a free land for build up their own house and whatever. They enjoy a lot of benefits. So that is a big change. So nowadays we can see that, okay, if you want to set up the ecological civilization, you will have a big, big social support. Because the people nowadays more have such kind of benefits. By the large investments, this investments just very much harmful for the treasury system, especially for the government's financial system. But it's benefits for the local demand. So we have now the three strategies. The first one is the so-called One Belt, One Road. And second one is a so-called SubRegional Integration in China. And if North Korea and South Korea can regain the peace, can work together, that means we will have another SubRegional Integration as the construction program. That is a so-called Chinese industrialization. Nothing good, nothing bad. We don't want to need to give the evaluation. We just think about telling you the truth, telling you the experience. We don't want to think that it's a good model. We think it's just nowadays still be there, facing many times challenge of the crisis. Some crisis is from domestic, some crisis is from overseas, but still be there. Nowadays, even Chinese industry is not much advantage. But if you calculate the total amount, if you calculate this total amount and then calculate it by PPP, you can think that industrial GDP nowadays, China is big enough. We need to reduce. We need to turn to this industrialization into new civilization, not insist on the industrialization because too much pollution and a lot of bad things happen. So that's this time, caused by such kind of challenge, China want to have a new strategy. One thing is, I said, is a 3-1. The first One Belt, One Road, second one is sub-regional integration, third one is rural revitalization. Can absorb large number of the big surplus from the industries. And also, caused by the agriculture surplus, we also need to change the old styles of the agriculture production, reduce the chemical, reduce the machines, and then try to use more and more organic production way. So that is also the big change. And let's go to finish my speaking. And we still have time? Okay. From this picture, you can see that the year 2005, China started the investments into the infrastructure construction in countryside. Increased more faster year-round. Nowadays, I said we have $2 trillion invest into the countryside for improve two things. One is infrastructure construction, and the second one is rural infrastructure construction, the social construction. Nowadays, all the households in countryside can the children can have a free education and free lunch. And all the households in the countryside can enjoy 80% of the health care reimbursements. 80%. 80% means that 80% paid by central governments. Nowadays in China, citizens' social welfare paid by city governments. Rural people's social welfare paid by central governments. That is different. So the citizens have the position as citizen, but the peasants, the rural people, have the position of the national citizen. So that's different. So the governments directly pay and then set up the fiscal account in the county, special for rural people. So that is a big change. Nowadays, we are trying to make the rebalance between rural and urban. So the new rural revitalization will be a new movement to mobilize the urban citizen, especially the urban middle class, going down to merge with the households in rural, in countryside. And then that will be a new movement, make the people merge together. If we originally said it's industrial capital only allocated in urban area, and then rural contributed surplus to urban. But nowadays, the whole of this structure changed. Large number of investments have gone to the countryside. So nowadays, it's the time for the people merge together. So the rural people move to the urban area. Urban people now move to the countryside. So a lot of people nowadays in countryside. So it's caused by more easier to down to the village. And then caused by large number of the investments, the agriculture now became big surplus. China now produced 70% of the freshwater products of the world, 67% of the vegetable of the world, 51% of the meal of the world, and 40% of fruits of the world. But the population in China, 19%, means that at least more than half is overproduction. So from the industry, we said overproduction is a big challenge. Now turn to the agriculture. So now China more emphasized supplier reform. What is that? Supplier reform means that the urban industry, the problem is a surplus. And then the rural agriculture also facing the challenge of surplus. So we have now very much emphasize the structural reform. Means that when you're facing the both industry and the agriculture surplus, you need to change your structure. That is a structural reform. And by such kind of reform, we are now more emphasize the ecological civilization and the rural revitalization, try to interact between rural and urban. So these are the pictures our rural reconstruction movement state. During these 18 years, we started a year 2001. Now it's 18 years past. We have done a lot of local programs in the countryside to mobilize the rural people and mobilize the urban people going down to the countryside, and then they merge together, they help each other, and then they set more harmonious societies, whatever. So these are pictures to show that. And then these are the villages. We are trying to do some local program. We mobilize the local people to organize the cooperatives for self-interest protection. Means that now rural people, they set up the cooperatives for peasants' interest. Self-organization, self-empowerment, and self-management, self-development. We also help the local people try to learn to build up the recycling materials construction. That is ecological architectures. Not use too much cementos, iron products, We use the traditional local raw materials, build up their architecture. We're also trying to help them to have the cycling agriculture, nothing waste, nothing pollution. So we have a lot of new programs in the countryside, but the basic measure in mainland China rural reconstruction movements is organization, reorganization. Help the local people organize themselves for their own development. So that is our program. So we more emphasize the traditional culture, more emphasize the local performance. Because the local people, they have a lot of local cultural events. Just help them to develop. And then they can use these local cultural events more low cost for set up their own organizations. So the rural organizations, the rural architectures by rural people themselves now became more and more popular. So that is not only cooperative, but also the cultural events and aging peoples and females and whatever. So when the social movements outside, they emphasize, and then turn to China became the China styles social movements. But we may not in name of movements. We initiate thousands of local programs in the countryside by local people themselves. Our intellectuals, we only the resource person. We set up several centers and institutes and schools in different provinces. We mobilize more than 200 universities to set up student societies. Our professors, intellectuals, we just give them instruction, and then they do whatever they can do by themselves. And then nowadays, we have 200,000 students from the urban college and the universities down to the village to help the villagers have self-organization, set up their organizations. Now we have many young people here. They all participated. So think about 200 universities, 200,000 young students, hundreds and thousands villages. It's a big power. So if you can initiate these local people, have self-organization, self-empowerment, self-management, and self-development, means that it's a big rural people's movement. Nowadays, it's become a big event. When the official emphasize the rural revitalization, maybe that is for solve the problem of the overproduction. Leading this surplus industrial capital is capital, follow down to the countryside. If you make these households single, separated, nobody can protect themselves. So we cannot stop this surplus capital flow down. But at least we can help local people organize themselves. At least they can have the position to negotiate. So that may not be the revolution, but it's what is that? It's a reform, or it's an evolution, or whatever. But anyway, it's change. So we are trying to change more and more. These are the young people going down to the village. They have done a lot of very active things. And maybe some young people can find yourself inside these pictures. And then we also have some so-called high graduated new farmer. And they are not exactly the farmer, but they are initiator for organic production in countryside. And we're also trying to set up the ecological agriculture. And means that nothing waste, almost all of these agricultural events, all in a circle. No pollution. So that is a new style of our ecological civilization, of our merging together of citizens and rural people. These are so-called ecological architectures. All use the the soil and the wooden structure, and joined by the local people themselves, not by this real estate company. So that's in countryside. So we built up these architectures for rural people. And then these the very old styles construction now leased by citizens, and then they rebuild to be the so-called 民宿 or 农家乐, means that it's for agricultural tourism. These weekend citizens can lease the rooms in this house, but it's a long history. This one, the left one, is more than 200 years. It's old-fashioned construction, and then rebuilt by the middle-class citizens, and then absorb this agricultural tour, and then to make local people can have more cash income from the rural tourism, agricultural tourism. So there's a lot of change. And that these are the cultural events. We mobilize the people, join the movements, love your home village. And then they join these cultural events for agricultural regeneration. And this one is the case to show that young participants join the village architectures. That is, they are set about small scenes for improve the village so-called scenic environment. So there's students going down to the countryside, they can do a lot of creatives. And this one is another case, how to reform the village property rights, how to make almost all the villagers have their property rights. When they set up the cooperative, cooperative is all members cooperative. All members have their property rights, and then they can share the profits. When the cooperative join the management, join the business, so they have the returns and then share to all the members in the village. Means that by such kind of new reform, there will be no extremely poor. All the members in the village can enjoy a share from the economic growth. So that is the way we solve the problem of the extremely poor. Means that make all the rural people to be the small properties holder. All the people as the member to enjoy your small property return. So means that you are not poor. You have your properties permanently. So that is our rural system now. Here is our conference inside. Not like the conference here, it's just a small participants. We have thousands. And every time when we have such kind of conference, we have thousands participants for 3 days, morning, afternoon, and evening. Every day we have 3 sessions. So they don't want to retreat. They all participate, they keep their energy. So that is our national conference. Because the people do have their benefits. They want to share the experience with others. So that is a new ally we set up since the year 2015 for the organic, for the ecological agriculture. And finally, I think that you may know that what is nowadays Chinese system. Economically, because of this more than 10 years, since 1998, when China first facing the challenge of overproduction, nowadays we have a 2 times overproduction crisis. 2 times. These are 2 times China from the traditional philosophy. We said we can take the crisis in Western Western culture is very bad. But in China, you can part it into two meanings. One is danger. Another is opportunity. So crisis in China is two meanings, danger and opportunity. So when the overproduction crisis happened, China take it as opportunity for set up rebalance. Originally, China just developed a coastal area. But take the first crisis, China started the investments into the inland. So 5 years later or 6 years later, China realized the rebalance between inland and the coastal. So nowadays, inland China provinces GDP grows faster than coastal. So means that you set up the rebalance between coastal China and inland China. And then urban China and rural China. Originally, rural China contributed surplus for urban industrialization. But nowadays, rural got large amount of the investments from the central. Even central take very heavy debts. But anyway, these debts means that they change the rural situation. Now we have the second, means that the rebalance between rural and urban. The third one is rich and poor. I don't believe any country can make rebalance between rich and poor. But at least we can have no extremely poor. So that is our new system. We are trying to make all the low class have the properties. At least you can avoid the extremely poor. You have your property income. So that is when we talk about this from 1998 to 2018, we have a 20 years strategy. It's to keep investments into the infrastructure construction. And then we have a physical assets enlarged to 5 trillion. 5 trillion means that ordinarily if these mountains have no pavement road, you cannot just drive your car into the mountain. You cannot enjoy these beautiful scenes. But now when you build up this road and then you have a Wi-Fi and anybody can go inside and then you can enjoy your vacation. You can recreation in the mountain area. So mountain hillside land increase their value. The mountain village, these peasant households increase their value. So originally, and when I'm working in the policy circle, it's 20 years ago, we calculate our land value. We said, okay, in the countryside, with the total amount of the land value is that 10 billion. Now we calculate our arable land. We said it's 100 trillion. Increase the value by infrastructure construction. Similar things happen in South Korea. That is 1980s, 1970s to 1980s. But because it's peninsular, it's smaller, so they cannot enlarge too much. Similar things happen in Japan. That is also in 1980s. But Japan is an island country, so cannot be much bigger physical assets. But in mainland, in this big indigenous continent, if you keep invest into infrastructure construction, you may make the physical assets in countryside increase the value. So the total amount of the physical assets in mainland China now enlarged to 500 trillion. It's Chinese yuan. And then another murdic things happened. Chinese central governments enlarge of the financial assets. Originally, financial assets, if you cannot use this financial capital into the infrastructure construction, okay, financial assets enlarge, and then your physical assets smaller. What happened? Uneven, upside down pyramid. But when you use this big capital into the infrastructure construction, you enlarge your physical assets, and then what happened? It's an Egyptian pyramid. Your assets bigger, your financial smaller. and then percentage of your debts became smaller. I suppose anybody can understand. This is a very simple calculation. So the economic structure in China now became somehow more stable. It's because of they set up an Egyptian pyramid. By long-term, keep invest into infrastructure construction, even no return. Even that is not so-called market system. But certainly, I think that it's propaganda still talk a lot about Chinese featured market system, whatever. But indeed, it's not. Okay, caused by the economic structure, we have a social structure. When you make the low class all become small properties holders, means low class is a petty bourgeoisie. Bourgeois. Bourgeois is a not good word, okay, according to Marxism. But it no bad, no good. If you give the properties rights to all the households in countryside, means that low class in China is even scattered. But our work is help them to organize, and then they can negotiate with any outsider capital investors. They can protect their interest. The local resources belong to the village. When you want to come to village, you need to negotiate. If you don't want to pay, okay, you go out. So such kind of organization means that low class, well organized, can protect their interest. So but that is the base. And then based on that, nowadays, during this half century, they merged out middle class. It's almost 30%. You can see that there's a 500 million middle class as a population. 500 middle class population in China means 3 times than the total middle class in the United States, 2 times than the total middle class in Europe. And then whatever you see by Western media is most described as middle class. They are not very silent. They speak louder, and then they buy a lot of luxury things, and then they have tourists in Europe, and then make European people think that it's dissatisfied. But it's middle class. So something like Western Europe dislike American and Australian middle class come back to the Europe, and because they are too much rough and whatever, not so quiet, and so on and so on. Nowadays the same. This new merging middle class somehow not so polite, not so quiet. But that is not represent China. Think about there is a 6% low class still be there inside. That is a big social structure. And then you'd better pay attention to one thing different. We have a low class, we have middle class. But the high class in China is fully politicized. What is high class? Why that United States must fight China with trade war? Because high class in China means that big capital. The big capital in China exactly controlled by state. I just mentioned, gave you the story in the year 1998, almost all the state banks need bankrupted. But 20 years later, the top 1 bank, the biggest one in the world, is Chinese State Bank, ICBC. The top 3, also the Chinese bank, State Bank. The top 4, top 6, all the Chinese bank originally in 1998 must be bankrupted because bad loan is 1/3. So state invest into this state bank means that this bank, they do long-term credit. Money is long-term credit. Government bonds, also long-term credit. Long-term credit need
to be run by long-term firms. Private, not long-term firm. Even you can have 100 years. Okay, so that is different system. That is also why the leading country of Western world, the United States, dissatisfied and also dislike Chinese economic system. But anyway, that is one kind of style. No matter you like it or you hate it, you need to know it. So that is my presentation. Thank you.